Welcome to this next panel, New Technologies for Disaster Response and Recovery. My name is Chisato Fukuda-Calvert. I sit on the board of After the Fire, and I'm also a Sonoma County resident. The topic of this panel really is to do a deeper dive in terms of analyzing the different types of technologies and data that's being utilized by companies and organizations to really further our understanding of disaster response and recovery. And I am joined here today by three of our panelists. I'm excited to introduce you to Chris Godley, Director of Emergency Management of Sonoma County, Gil Gonzalez, co-founder of Subsidy.com, as well as John Clarke Mills, CEO of Watch Duty. So I think just to share also a brief introduction about myself, I'm also the Strategic Partnership Director at a company called Sinai Technologies, and we are also a technology software company, and we help a lot of the heavy to abate emission intensive companies to decarbonize their operations and meet their net zero targets. And so technology is very much on top of mind, and really excited to hear from this group. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to Chris to share a little bit about your background as well as the work that you've been doing in emergency management.
Sure. Well, thanks so much. I'm Chris Godley. I'm the local yokel here in Sonoma County. I'm the county's basically lead emergency manager. Our job, if you aren't familiar with emergency managers, is to think deep, dark, paranoid thoughts constantly about what can go wrong. Now, to be honest, we are paid to be paranoid, not just amateurs here. But then how do we get ready for them? And then how do we coordinate a response and recovery effort? Here in Sonoma County, it's important to note, being an emergency manager, I'm not a technologist, so I have no clue how they do what they do to actually develop technologies and actually move them into application. I am an end user, essentially. So here in Sonoma County, we've had the experience in the 2017 fires, and very quickly we realized recovery is just not restoring and rebuilding. It was actually a chance to make significant gambles, if you would, for change and growth and how we do business in the field of emergency management. Created a new Department of Emergency Management, which is relatively rare in Western United States and actually across the country, to elevate the function of disaster readiness, if you would, to the level of senior executives. That was one of the big moves here, as well as additional resources and staffing. Dr. Nancy Brown is here. She heads up our community preparedness program. So it was really a novel experiment, and so as part of that, though, we did embrace the potential for technology to help us do our work. And so to that end, we currently employ about 60 different technology systems for communications, information management, whether it's business operations, hazard analysis about what could go wrong, what's the actual quantitative and objective measure of potential threat and hazard, especially now with climate change. We do some real-time modeling to tell us just which direction the fire might go or just how high the water might go. We do public information in a significant way, especially now with social media, aggregating that information so that it's a conversation with the community instead of just cranking out content and hoping everyone reads it. We really wanted to have that more direct relationship with our community. Dynamic scaling websites that won't fail at 3 o'clock in the morning just because everyone and their mother is jumping on them. We've had pretty good success with that, but it's taken a lot of work behind the scenes. The two pieces of technology I'd very briefly mention that are significant for us and probably for you working with survivors of fire-scarred communities. The first is situational awareness, which is, can please someone tell me exactly what is going on out there? I mean, that's really the fundamental question we have when we're exposed to fire, whether it's smoke in the air or sirens in the distance. That's the first question, is just how bad is it? Where is it going to go? And we've seen that time and time again as being a fundamental stumbling block for most communities as we really wrestle with the new radical fire behaviors that we're seeing in the last 10 years. And so we're looking at developing and hoping to bring more situational awareness into both for tactical use by public safety, but for us as well to help shape support for evacuations, care and sheltering, traffic management, public information. We've used a few new tools. Many of you are familiar with fire monitoring cameras. You know, people sit there and they stare at the screen and they wait for the smoke to show up. Well, that doesn't really work very well if you've got, like we do, in excess of 30 cameras covering our area. So we partnered with a Korean company to beta test artificial intelligence to monitor those cameras. Last year we were looking for smoke plumes. Works pretty good, but apparently everyone is awake during the daytime when you can see the smoke. So it was very rare, about 3% of the time, that artificial intelligence would beat people on 911 calls. Pretty rare. This year, though, we're looking for nighttime starts. Everyone's asleep, no one's looking out the window. That's where we hope the system would really begin to pay off for us, as well as help triangulate location and guide firefighters more directly to the response. Another exciting part of my job is alert and warning. Anyone have a phone? Does anybody have one of these fancy computer things? Yeah. Anyone ever have one of these go off and just scare the hell out of you? Yeah, that's my fault. Here in Sonoma County, at least. Sorry, I can't own everything everywhere. I will mention that this is problematic for us in public safety and emergency management because alert and warning systems that we currently use, I'll just mention it. We did a presentation for our fellow emergency managers earlier this year, and the title of the session was, Why Your Alert and Warning System Sucks, okay? Because this sucks, totally sucks. But it is the tool that we have, and it's really a composite tool of GIS data, communications that go from a vendor's data management system into the federal IPAWS system, which comes back out to the private wireless broadband providers, and then hopefully they'll send it to your phone. But this is state of the art, and it pretty much sucks. And the reason why it's going to continue to suck is because it's not a priority. It's just not important for the federal government. They're just not investing any money in this. There's some scratching around the edges, but we invest less in public warning in the United States than we invest in a single major Fortune 500 company application. Pick a company, maybe it's Domino's Pizza, they've invested more in their app than we invest in public warning systems in the United States. And so this is what we're left with. So for our end here in Sonoma County, we want to maximize the use of these maximize the capability of these systems. We have full-time alert warning staff. There are 2 jurisdictions in the state of California that have full-time alert and warning staff. One of them is San Diego County, which is big, and the other is Sonoma County, and that's it. Everyone else in the state of California in public safety and local government, emergency management, whatever you have, is doing alert and warning as an additional duty. They're not focused on it. They don't understand the science, the sociology, the technology, and that's why we continue to have problems. About half the employment of warning systems in the Western United States in the last 3 years have had problems. They sent out the warning to too small an area. They didn't use all the warning systems that were available to them. They didn't send out the warnings in the appropriate languages. It didn't hit all the devices that they thought it was going to hit. And that's because, again, it's not a priority. Most local governments do not have staff that can focus on alert and warning. And that's one of the changes we hope to have here is, in addition to the technology, the actual tool, the device, we have to have the people, the procedures, the policies, and the systems that allow us to maximize those technologies and employ them effectively. That's plenty for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And our next speaker will be Gil Gonzalez, co-founder of Subsidy.com.
Well, hopefully, I can't say that I have such an exciting introduction as he does. That's pretty impressive what you're working on. So I spent the better part of 15 years working in economic development for various elected officials. I worked for the state of California, for the city of Los Angeles, and for the state of Arizona. A few months ago, actually about 9 months ago, I partnered with the former senior guy from Google and another gentleman from Pandora. And my expertise and domain expertise has always been government incentives. So you hear about all these tax credits, grants, government financing programs, et cetera. And what we decided to do was come together, combine our domain expertise to create essentially the TurboTax of government incentives for America's small businesses. So what that means is on any given year, just to kind of give you some statistics, between the federal and state incentive programs, there's probably about $150 to $180 billion that's allocated each year. 97% of those funds end up in the hands of companies with 500 and more employees. And that's for a lot of reasons. One is obviously there's so many different programs. There's over 2,000 programs alone across all 50 states. But more importantly, and this is the problem that we're addressing head on, is that it's very complex. There's several applications, hard to apply. People don't understand the program. So we've created a single access point where a company can come, get matched with the programs that they qualify for, and then more importantly, I got a note that I think it's from my, doesn't like talking about tax credits, sorry. A single access point where all of these programs are populated into one database, and a company comes and integrates with us, and we not only match them with the programs, but more importantly, we apply on their behalf to the various programs. We're in the process and have developed a common application, and as you look at these programs across federal and state tax credits or grants or financing, there's some common questions, and once a company is integrated with subsidy, we can easily help them apply for, could have helped them apply for PPP or the R&D tax credit, or even an SBA disaster recovery tax credit, or anything in between. So we're very passionate about this. We've helped, well, officially we launched in April after raising our seed round late last year. I think we've helped probably about a dozen or so companies claim over $25 million to date so far, and now we're rolling this out nationally. And again, this is we're very passionate about democratizing access to these programs. These are their tax dollars, and our job is to get them back in the hands of these taxpayers. So that's us.
Great, thank you so much. And our final panelist is John Clarke Mills, CEO of Watch Duty.
My story is a lot like some of yours in this room. Fire knocked on my door, and it brought me here today to do what I'm doing. People like Chris and Nancy and this government has been very helpful in ways that they can. Unfortunately, it has not been enough. The first time I was notified of a wildfire was when a helicopter was overhead trying to pull water out of my swimming pool, and then a C-130 came over my house and dropped retardant on my neighbor. I was not notified. No one told me anything. There was nothing in the newspaper, and I realized, oh my God, I live in the middle of nowhere in fire country, and no one is going to save me but my community. The second time was the Walbridge fire. That's when I started to realize that, like, I needed to defend myself and my land and my community and my neighborhood. And so I ended up doing mop-up on my own in wildfire, which I was not prepared for. I then started doing my wildfire training. I bought myself a white Dodge. I snuck behind fire lines. I was breaking encryption to try and get information from people who were taking it and hiding it from us, including our governments. There are corporations out there who are profiting on what is going on. And what we do at Watch Duty, and what I do now, is free that information so all of you can see in real time and make decisions. That information is on broadcast device in clear text. Everyone can hear it on the scanner. Why is that being kept and hidden from us? Why are certain departments going to encrypted communications? Why is this being hidden from us? And it is our tax dollars. We're the ones paying for this. This is public intel. Do not tell me to evacuate 30 minutes after a fire start, and don't tell me which way to go. Do I go east or do I go west? What road am I on? Where do I go? This is not about text messaging, this GIS, it is about a story. And we need to understand as people our safety and how do we band together. And so what I did during the Walbridge fire is I realized that the best intel I could find was obviously on the radio, and then the second best was people who listen to the radios and put it on Facebook and Twitter. There are men and women across the state and across the country who are woodsmen who live in radio shacks, who are geeks and freaks like I was for many years, still am. But these people are the ones who are now being given a voice. So that voice is now amplified on watch duty, and there are about 30 people who are looking over your shoulder every day, all the time throughout California, who are always on, always watching. We have built systems in place to allow us to see new fire starts, to see every pulse point, every CHP call. Everything gets fed into our internal messaging queue, and we see everything. We relay that information out as fast as we can. It is looked at by multiple people to make sure it's accurate. We sit on information longer than you may think. Some people think it's immediate. We hear it. We hear a replay. The second person hears it. Someone has eyes on it from the alert wildfire cameras, whatever it may be. Then that information comes out. We may be beating the government, but we are making sure that we're doing our best to put out good information, because this is dangerous. We live here too. All of us do. So what Watch Duty is here to do is more than what you see today. It is to free this information so you guys can make informed decisions about life and safety. That said, use Nixle, listen to your government, listen to Chris Godley. These people know what they're doing. We're trying to put all the information in one place, in real time, faster than anybody else, and give it back to the people who paid for it. Thank you.
I like this guy.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. So I have a few questions would love to like dig deeper, a little bit deeper into, but also wanted to have a little bit of time. I'm sure you all have questions as well, so I'll make sure to bake in 5 to 10 minutes for questions from the audience as well. So all three of you actually touched on kind of the availability of data. There's lots of data. There's lots of information out there. How has your organization been using this data to really support communities? How do you, I think, Chris, you mentioned something about prioritization. So in this influx of having so much data available, how do you actually sift through that data and decide which sets of data or what kind of information is really the necessity for communities that are in the process of recovery and rebuild?
I'll share with you, you're all probably wrestling with the same thing I do, which is there's just too much stuff coming at me, right? I mean, every day that inbox just keeps banging away, and there's tweets and nixles popping off once in a while. And so that's really going to be our challenge in the 21st century, is moving through not a dearth of data, but this overabundance of data, sifting through it. And that's how, as John was talking about, the big companies are making money off big data. The social media companies, they owe their whole existence to their capacity to data mine and package and make relevant data to their consumers, their customers. So government is about, 8 years behind that, maybe, at least. We tend to move a tad bit slower in adopting new systems, new technologies. But in terms of what's important, what's information is important, that's changed also, because when I started this game 25 years ago, if we had a fire, it was like, oh, okay, well, we've got a couple days to deal with that and get people out of the way, and it'll all be fine. We can drive up there and knock on the doors. But now we need information that's actionable, not just information, but actionable intelligence, as we call it, that we can move on within minutes. Whether it's a fire start in a location, a modeling program that might show us where the fire is going to go and how fast it's going to spread, that's information we need so that we can help support both the tactical response as well as emergency public information and warning. So the data we really move through, and this is very important for warning especially, is we use about 8 different warning systems. Some of these are just broadcasts only. There's no way to identify a single recipient. So the emergency alert system that just fires off on your radio or TV, it's just kind of a nuclear blast. It just goes out there. Wireless emergency alerts are the same way. If we put one out on your phone, we don't know that you've received it. Your telecommunications provider does not provide us, if you would, that feedback on how many of those devices actually received the message. And so what we're looking at now is also more targeted information. Very briefly, most of you are familiar with opt-in warning systems in your jurisdictions. You might sign up, at a fair, or you go online, you sign up, you provide your phone number, maybe an email address if you like, or a home line, that kind of thing. those are very poorly, they don't have great performance in a disaster event because very few people actually sign up ahead of time for these opt-in systems. So in Sonoma County, what we did is we went after the data specifically to your question about, we know everybody out here has got contact information. Where is that data? And so we were able to leverage a new state law that allowed us to go after utility companies, most notably in Northern California, Pacific Gas and Electric, local water utility companies, and we were able to get their databases and bring that into what was officially or formally an opt-in system. So now, for most residents in Sonoma County, we know where you are. We have contact information. If you live in a single residence, absolutely, I've got 95% of you. If you live in a common address, like a utility that's a single bill to an apartment, that's more challenging for us. But that's what's made our warning systems more effective, is we know where to go and find you. Or maybe you've registered because you are interested in grandma's house on the other side of town, you'll still get that information. We're the only county in the state that successfully negotiated an agreement with Pacific Gas and Electric. And that was through almost 9.5 months of constant nagging. That's what it took. But because we had dedicated staff that could nag all the time. And after almost 2 years of the bill's existence, we remain the only county that has access to the information for PG&E subscribers, which blows my mind. So in terms of the question about what kind of data do we need credible and accurate data, especially for contact information. With everyone moving so constantly, that data gets bad, gets stale. There's a lot of disconnects or unknown phone numbers very quickly for us. So knowing where our community is and how to reach them is really critical for us. That would probably be my one example.
Great, thank you. John or
I'd be happy to
Bill?
go. I mean, I think I described my business as based on open data, so I kind of answered that question, I guess. We wouldn't be here without firefighters and people in the woods dragging hoses, talking to each other on the radio. That is what we do. That's who we listen to. We obviously put out nixles and everything else that we hear from the government, but ultimately, like, everyone is pushing the ball forward, and the governments are doing a great job. Obviously, things have gotten so much better here since 2017.
Yeah, but we're still not, we couldn't give John our secret computer-aided dispatch information.
Yeah, and that was obviously not your fault for that, but I mean, like, and I appreciate what you guys try to do for me, but we're privately voted down in closed-door meetings that I am not privy to. I'm told that I am not able to have this data because I am not a government vendor. I'm an NGO, 501c3, apolitical nonprofit with no other agenda than to free this information for your safety. And I'm being denied behind my back, not to my face, of these types of things. So what did we do? We listened to the radios as much as possible. That's what we continue to do. This information will be freed. We will continue to do so and keep everybody safe. Outside of that, I wish I had more I could add to this, but I feel like we've done a very good job with what we have, but more partnerships will be helpful. We are working with Red Cross and a couple others. A lot of the animal evacuation shelters, Red Crosses will work with us, but a lot of the PIOs will not interface with us.
The PIO is a public information officer from a government agency who's afraid to say anything at all unless it's been vetted by 4 other people. So,
thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, we speak to the business community. I mean, that's our constituency. Those are our customers. So more often than not, we're going and finding, I mean, you'd be, actually, I don't know if you'd be surprised of the numerous programs, if not hundreds of programs that are buried in a PDF at some sort of state level or federal level, and finding that application, digitizing it, putting it into a format where it not only speaks to our software, but more importantly in a way that it's going to make it easy to understand by the consumer, who's the small business owner. And again, this is both on the pre-disaster, post-disaster side. But so we have data parsers, scrapers. Like I said, one of my co-founders came from Google, so he's a highly technical. But what I think is most important, though, is our goal is to meet the small business owners where they are, and not put forth much more complicated applications and or systems in front of them saying, hey, you got to go through all these hoops, but make it as simple as possible to say, complete one application, and, that branches out to saying, hey, if you want to apply for these 5, 6 different programs, whether it's a disaster recovery program and or a tax credit, R&D tax credit or something like that, that they can do that all in a few clicks because we're doing the work for them with the assistance of obviously our automation software.
Great. I guess kind of coattailing on that topic about accessibility and also the availability of data, I guess as you continue to innovate and integrate new types of data, as you start to think about the growth of the technology and the scalability of that technology, a key component of that is user feedback or community feedback. I'm wondering if you can speak to, through a couple of examples maybe, what is that feedback loop look like for your organization? What are examples of feedback that you receive from specific members of the community or specific customers, and how do you integrate that feedback to continually innovate?
I'll just jump on. Government enjoys a great deal of feedback from its residents and communities. People feel empowered to bring forth their perspectives and views. We get that informally, of course, phone calls, whatever. We get media coverage, which gives us a great deal of feedback as well from traditional media. Social media is not shy about providing input. We have formal internal and external reviews of most major disaster events, which really look at various aspects of the immediate response, and they give us feedback on what we should be doing differently or keep doing what we are doing. Dr. Brown actually innovated a new post-disaster online survey that we did for the last several fires and the flood. I forgot, we've had so many events. But the idea that you would go proactively out to your community and say, hey, so how did that go for you? How'd the alert and warning thing? Okay, better, different, sheltering, evacuation, public information, access to resources. What was your experience? What were your, not just yes, no, 1, 2, 3 ratings, but what were your subjective experiences? And to that end, she's actually just authored a paper that got accepted for publication analyzing some of our responses recently. And I really do think that is the way of the future, is that not having institutional filters bring feedback into government as to what went right and what went wrong, but actually getting that raw feedback from the community is extremely helpful for us. And it's important for us also to really find folks in the community that we may have overlooked, to be quite honest, or were underserved. And that's one of the best ways we can do it, is proactively seek that feedback for improving our operations. And it helps keep us grounded and connected, to be honest, with the community. It's very easy for us to sit in our little command box and just read what's on the screen or what's showing up on the TV monitor. But when you get back out there and you touch base with people, that's what helps continue to keep us engaged and motivated to do what we do.
Yeah, I mean, my feedback for the government was, I'm going to build, hold my beer, I'm going to build Watch Duty, because I wanted something that was going to actually solve my issue in real time. But as for what you see in Watch Duty, we launch new features almost every week, and it all comes from you guys. It's emails, complaints, Facebook, text messages, phone calls. We are light and fast and built that way on purpose, which is, jealous, I know, a luxury that we have to be able to do this, is move quick without breaking things. That is the caveat. We take this very seriously, but that's the best part about this, is a lot of us have lived through disaster and fire, and then you guys will tell us what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right, and it's really been quite beautiful to be able to iterate incredibly quickly and give you guys new features. So to us, it comes natural. That's who we are.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo those comments. We're a venture capital-backed software startup company, and our investors and our customers are our most important feedback mechanism. So similar, it happens real time. Somebody will say, hey, this functionality didn't work, and we have a team of 4 engineers, and they're working on it that day, and usually having that problem resolved in minutes, or hours rather, sometimes days. What I would say though is, in terms of feedback, and especially the audience that is here, I used to work for government. I worked for the state of California for several years, and worked for a couple states for that matter, though, is that I think that the feedback from the private sector and from the business community going towards the folks that are actually administering these programs in the state or even at the federal level, there's a big disconnect between there. I mean, I would love more than anything in the world that subsidy didn't have to exist, but we do because it's functional, it's confusing. 99% of the time, I'm giving feedback to even some of my old colleagues in the governor's office in the state of California. And now that I'm not there anymore, it kind of falls on deaf ears. That's not to say that that's their fault, but I think it's really important for folks that you as community leaders here, again, if something's not working, that information is pushed to your elected officials, pushed to the administrators of these programs, because we can only do so much. Again, I wish that we didn't have to exist, but I see a very bright future for us because I don't see government being responsive to feedback, and I only see it probably getting even worse. And I hate to sound like a negative Ned, but that's just the reality of it. So,
Just for the record, when you all walk out of here, that was negative Ned, and it wasn't Chris this time, so that's good. Usually I'm the one. So.
And last question before I turn it over to the participants is, what does success look like for your organization? And how do you plan to get there? You know, what are you actually working toward? And how do you ensure that you're actually, you know, meeting that particular goal as you continue to innovate, continue to have that feedback loop, and kind of adapt your technology to community needs?
I'll take this one, and it'll be short, is that one is the smaller the business, the shorter these applications should be on the government side. I mean, that's just pretty straightforward. So the vision that we see is that there should be a common application, similar to that there is for applying for federal financial aid when you're going to college, and that you complete it once. You don't have to complete it while your business is burning to the ground, trying to beg for your tax dollars to come back to you at the most neediest times. And that it's something that government adopts to and adapts to truly serve the business, small business owners. So again, the takeaway is that there's a common application that one fills out once. It's constantly ongoing and monitored, whether it's by subsidy or any other software tech startup that pops up, and that they're doing literally 3 to 4 clicks to apply for programs when they need the funds or the tax credits or programs and help the most. That's the future that we see.
I might as well go. Our goal has been to be on 1 in every 3 cell phones of fire-affected communities. We have done that in about 5 of the 58 counties currently in terms of market penetration. These are all Silicon Valley nonsense terms. What it matters to me is that everybody knows where to go very quickly in the minute a disaster happens. That is our goal. And it's not just California, because next year we're doing Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and eventually we're going to keep going east, because this is not about fire. This is about adapting to a changing climate and a changing world.
So success for us, short answer is no one dies. Okay, longer answer is that we have individual residents, families, neighborhoods, communities that are truly educated and prepared and connected and truly resilient to withstand, as he was saying, the climate change challenges that are coming our way. And that we're moving away, and this is very important, government is no longer the center of the universe when it comes to disaster. With the rise of technology, communication, social media especially, we have really empowered individuals. Many of you are self-starters that stood up and took a leadership role. We've empowered community-based organizations, whole networks like this one, to really step into and help do a better job of responding to the needs of those impacted by disasters than government ever could. And so our goal for success is to see that and help facilitate and support that effort. We don't want to own this as government. As a matter of fact, before I took this job, I was private sector, and I used to rail, just like everybody else, against government. So I kind of keep that to heart once in a while. I really do believe in the next 10 years, we're going to see a radical transformation of how our country responds to these events. And government's only going to be one of the players on the field, and they're not going to be calling all the plays.
Amazing. Thank you, panelists. And I wanted to open up the floor. Oh, perfect. We have someone in the back for questions.
So thanks for the question, because honest to God, I actually have an answer for this one. So many of you are familiar with an organization called Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster, VOADs for short. Essentially, local, homegrown, ad hoc, varying different degrees of sophistication across the country of how to unify voluntary organizations that traditionally have a response role in disaster. Well, in Sonoma County, after 2017 fires and the massive impact it had both physically on the community, emotionally on the community, the VOAD, if you would, took over a large part of this coordination of community-based organizations and nonprofit coordination to support some of the initial response, but also especially moving into recovery. That VOAD looked and did effectively evolve into what we now call the COAD, C-O-A-D, the Community Organizations Act in Disaster. This allowed a broader stakeholder participation into the network, including faith-based organizations and those that don't really have volunteers, but they provide services to selected parts of our community. This is an especially important shift for us in Sonoma County. We just were awarded $1.9 million in ARPA funding to transform what had been, if you would, lessons learned and experiences in the last 3 or 4 years and move that into a sustainable institutionalized capability. So to that end, our $1.9 million is going to go largely to fund the capacity of our COAD and participating organizations to institutionalize and make permanent those relationships. And right now that includes some direct support to the COAD director salary. It helps to have actually people lead and you can pay them to do that work. I'll also mention that we're also developing our county recovery framework. How is the government going to get its act together? How are we going to meaningfully engage? Directly to your question, how are we going to do case management? Well, the answer right now is, and I've got a meeting tomorrow, case management starts when someone walks into a temporary evacuation point, a shelter, or goes online. We want to have a seamless case management system that starts there on day one and takes them all the way through initial response and resources into recovery, whether it's housing or jobs or food benefits or whatever. That's our goal, is to bring one system that everyone can participate in, not just government, but the voluntary and community-based organizations as well. We're very excited about it. It's going to take us almost 18 months to build it if it doesn't kill us, but we believe this is the way going forward.
Thank you, Chris. I think we have time for maybe one more question before wrapping up the panel.
See, there it is right there. This is why I had to come today. Nancy, tackle her. Go. Thanks. So that's, and I appreciate the question because actually I was a psychology major at UCLA. So I always go to, how are people going to react to this? And they're going to react in very different ways, short-term, long-term. That cumulative effect of a disaster in a community does place significant stress on individuals and by extension, their families, the organizations that they work with or even socialize with. We're especially concerned about the impact on children. I'll be quite honest about that. It's no longer once in a blue moon, oh, there was an earthquake 20 years ago. Now it's every year, what's this disaster school day going to look like? I will share with you that is one of our goals on building this new community-centric recovery framework, is that what is the legitimate ask? What is the scope of mission for these organizations? What can we conceivably and practically do here? Well, this one organization series cannot feed 30,000 people. So we're not going to give them the mission of feeding everybody in the county. We are going to have to build a bigger machine with contingency contracts or whatever financial mechanisms are in place so that we can build a sustainable program. And it is going to involve the money. We know that coming up, that we're going to have to push money into these CBOs and volunteer organizations and faith-based organizations to do this work. Some of this will be just to augment what resources they already have, but some of these will then in fact become de facto contractors of the county so that they're not exposed to cash flow issues or massive gaps in funding and providing services. By contracting with them, the county then assumes the financial risk, provides the needed cash flow, the timely resources to get this job done. And God forbid, if we sign a good enough agreement, we might even get paid back by the state or the feds if we do it well enough. So to your question specifically, this ad hoc thing that we've been doing over and over does not work. That's why we think we have to develop a much more deliberate model and actually talk about the money up front.
Great. So thank you so much, Chris, John, Gil, for sharing your insights with us. I think some just really high-level big takeaways are that, you know, with the proliferation of wildfires and other disasters, technology and data are not a nice-to-have. They're an absolute must-have. We must democratize and make that data accessible to everyone. And we have to build sustainable and equitable systems for that distribution of information. And I want to shout out to this particular forum that After the Fire and partners have organized. I think that having this multi-sectoral collaboration, cross-pollination of ideas is really at the, you know, at the foundation of actually having these conversations, starting to challenge one another, start to be really critiquing what are the systems that need to be kind of undone or, you know, enhanced. So really applaud the panelists, the organizers, all the participants who are really committed to this cross-sectoral collaboration so we can create better systems for our society. Thank you.